for 2021. Just like every other lake, we did 4 sampling events from June until September. So the dates were June 4th, July 13th, August 4th, and September 22nd. The volunteer that we work with was Darren Lawrence. He's the volunteer in the picture in the middle, and he's sitting beside our LakeWatch technician, Brittany. So Brittany and Darren worked together the whole summer, and they did a standard sampling for Pigeon Lake. So that included doing profile measurements at the profile location, taking zooplankton or aquatic invertebrate samples at that profile location, doing composite sampling across the entire lake, and then in July and August, they did aquatic invasive species sampling. And to our knowledge at this point, no mussels have been detected in Pigeon Lake or any lake in Alberta in 2021. So that's good news. Also, Brittany and Darren went to the monitoring buoy during their LakeWatch sampling events to take profile measurements that were used to help validate and understand the quality of the data from the monitoring buoy. And Paul's going to get into that a bit later, but that's something that we did as well during the summer. As far as observations for the lake this previous summer, I think one of the biggest things that Darren and Brittany saw in the water happened earlier in the summer, kind of around the time where the heat dome hit, where they did observe whitefish, dead whitefish. It was a relatively minor kill, I would say, in terms of what we're hearing relative to years past for Pigeon Lake. But the kill is likely a result of the heat dome and calm conditions, and just caused kind of a squeeze of low oxygen waters at the bottom of the lake and warm waters at the surface. And again, the monitoring buoy is going to be able to point to some of the temperature extremes seen at that time and what that meant for the whitefish. Okay, getting into some preliminary results from the previous summer now. As far as chlorophyll A, or our proxy for algae and primary productivity, the beginning of the summer, June and July, was relatively low, and then jumped up later in the season. And total phosphorus and total nitrogen in the figures there also followed a similar trend, where they were a bit lower in the beginning of the season and then climbed later in August and in September. And I don't have it shown here, but our Secchi Depth values, or our measurements for water clarity, the lake was very clear in June, getting a Secchi Depth reading of about 4.2 meters, which is very good. And then that dropped later in the season and kind of matched the trends that we saw for chlorophyll A. Now getting into what that data meant for just how it compared to previous data for the lake. You can see 2021 on the right of the screen there, highlighted by that red circle. This is for chlorophyll A, and you can see that it wasn't a really bad year in comparison to other years that we've seen, like 2017 or 2011, but that we did see quite a large variability of chlorophyll A and larger values than say 2019, but not quite as bad as last year. The Secchi Depth readings for 2021 kind of follow a similar trend, where we did see fairly clear water quality or water clarity in the beginning of the season and then drop later in the season, and is quite comparable to the previous years for the lake as well. Yeah. And then for phosphorus, similar sort of thing with chlorophyll, where 2021 didn't seem to be quite as high for phosphorus as the year before, but a bit higher than, say, previous years like 2019 or even 2018 there. And the last data I'll kind of show for the summer is the total dissolved solids. That's our proxy for ions in the water, or salinity, you could say. And we're seeing a continuation of that increasing trend of total dissolved solids. And 2021 saw the highest TDS values in any year that we have data for. But it was a pretty variable year for TDS, as well, as you can see for the range of values in the box plot. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here now and start talking about our Winter Lake Keepers program. So this program is a bit different from our Lake Watch program in that we don't hire technicians to go out and sample with volunteers, but instead we have kits that we put together that include probes, bottle sets, and instructions, and we send those out to our volunteers and they sample themselves. And unlike Lake Watch, where it's pretty specific that they have to go to the same location and same locations throughout the summer season. For the winter program, it's completely up to our volunteers where they want to go and how often they want to go, but we do cap it at about 4 sampling events per season, just so that we can get the probes to all the volunteers who want to do the sampling in the winter. So in 2019, 2020, 2020, 2021 winter, there were 4 sampling events that were done at Pigeon Lake, just off of Grandview, and those sampling events were done by Don Davidson. Yeah, so for our Winter Lake Keeper program, we put kits together, which include probes, bottles, and a sampling manual, because the volunteers do the sampling themselves, and we don't have technicians going out with the volunteers. And I'll just say really quickly, it's different than our Lake Watch program in that it's completely up to the volunteers where they want to sample on the lake surface. Usually it's ice anglers who are participating, so they just want to sample where they're fishing. But for like safety reasons as well, we don't want to send any volunteers out to the middle of the lake. So they sample where they're comfortable, and they sample up to 4 times through the season. So the sampling was done by Don Davidson and a couple other volunteers at Pigeon Lake at a location just off of Grandview. So they sampled on December 22nd, January 18th, February 21st, and March 18th last winter. They took temperature and dissolved oxygen profiles, and then took grab samples through the auger hole for nutrient and water chemistry data, which includes phosphorus, nitrogen, dissolved organic carbon, chloride, conductivity, and pH data. And then they also took samples for chlorophyll A, a sample that was used to preserve phytoplankton for later taxonomic analysis, and then a sample for isotope analysis. So at this point, with the winter data from last year, currently doing data analysis and putting the report together. At this point, we're still waiting on the chlorophyll data. It may not actually be included in the report because we're aiming to release the report next Thursday. So yeah, once we get the chlorophyll data in hand, I'll just update it into the report, but it may not be available right away. The report is going to focus mainly on the water chemistry data. The phytoplankton sample that was collected, or the samples that were collected, are just archived and maybe analyzed if there's a pertinent question that arises with the phytoplankton or algae taxonomy. And the isotope samples from the whole season were also sent to John Gibson, who is going to be using them for his research on surface water, groundwater connectivity using isotope markers. As far as what I can tell you about the winter data at Pigeon Lake, one kind of interesting thing that I've noticed is I'm showing temperature and dissolved oxygen profiles from both last winter and the winter before. And if we compare the oxygen data between the 2 winters, what I kind of noticed is that there was a lot more oxygen that remained in the water column at fairly good depth, like down to 5 meters in the previous winter, where 2 winters ago we did see more oxygen depletion through the season. And another thing that I've noticed is as far as the seasonality, and that just to kind of explain the figure a bit, the darker the color, the later in the season the sample was collected. So one thing that I noticed that's consistent with both years is that we do get oxygen depletion lower in the lake at this Grandview location by about February, but once March kind of comes around, oxygen starts to kind of come back into the system, which is interesting. Lots of other lakes you see kind of linear oxygen depletion until March, until ice out, but there is a source of oxygen kind of later in the season, and it's possible that there is some under ice productivity that's adding oxygen back into the system in March and late in March. As far as the plan for the upcoming winter, we're planning to do the program as we did last year. hoping to get the same sort of information. And Don has already kind of said that he is interested in sampling at Grandview again. And maybe I just wanted to put it out there that it could be interesting for the lake as well if they added an additional site. One thing that I'm noticing with other lakes that had multi-site data from last winter, such as Wabamun and Wizard, that there are some interesting differences between some sites. So it might be interesting to have a winter site in that west basin. As we know, some of the water chemistry and even algal productivity differs between those two sides of the lakes, and that's something that we're learning about with our satellite work as well. So yeah, it's interesting to see if there may be some differences in the winter between the two sides of the lake as well. And that's all I've got.